Hey everyone, this presentation is designed to go over the principles of basic penalty enforcement. We had a little bit of a recording issue with the call last night, so I thought I'd go ahead and re-record for everybody and post it to the site. So here we go. The agenda for the call was basic enforcement principles, cover those, talk also about some other commonly called fouls, get into a little bit of mechanics, and then I was going to answer questions. Obviously, that's a little bit off the table for this recording, but hopefully you can email me at nursancafb@gmail.com. So let's start with our basic enforcement principles, specifically dealing with dead ball and interval fouls. Remember that penalties for dead ball fouls are administered separately in the order of occurrence. We're dealing with stuff like false start, 12 in formation, illegal kicks before they're ready for play, dead ball, and sportsmanlike conduct fouls. We will always enforce those separately and in the order of occurrence, except if we have a dead ball and sportsmanlike or dead ball personal foul by both teams, and they're reported to the referee and we haven't completed any of those penalties, we would cancel that. So we could theoretically, quote, offset 3 unsportsmanlike penalty or conduct penalties against one team with 1 unsportsmanlike conduct penalty by another team if the penalty was not completed. Now, the rule book specifically talks about what a completed penalty means, and it says that the penalty is completed when it's accepted, declined, or canceled according to rule, or when the choice is obvious to the referee. We talked yesterday on the call about some conferences want to make sure that you give choices to coaches, even if you feel like it's obvious. You can still do that, do what your supervisor wants. In many cases, choices are obvious, and we just need a confirmation from the coach to do what it is we thought we were going to do. Practically, we consider a penalty completed if the referee has announced it. So if the referee hasn't yet announced the penalty, we could go ahead and cancel those penalties if a second one were to occur. Note that an interval foul is a penalty that occurs between the end of the 4th period and the start of an extra period, between possession series and 1 extra period, or between the end of an extra period and the start of the next extra period. In that case, we would enforce all those penalties from the 25-yard line to start the next possession series. I think that's pretty straightforward. So, let's say that B makes a great 4th down stop on their possession series, and before we start and after that play, we have an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty for celebration. In that case, we would enforce that penalty from the 25-yard line to start the next series in the next extra period, or the second possession series in an extra period. For those of you who come from the high school world where we just have loose ball and running plays, the NCAA rule will have 4 different types of plays specific to penalty enforcement. The first one is a forward pass play, and we consider a forward pass play to be the interval between the snap and the end of the pass. The basic spot for these fouls is the previous spot, except that Team B personal fouls that occur during forward pass plays can be enforced from the end of the last run, provided the run ends beyond the neutral zone. There's not a change of possession during the down. In the event that either or both of those categories or both of those requirements are not met, we would enforce that penalty at the previous spot. There are some specific examples for contact fouls by A behind the line of scrimmage, but I'll get to that in a minute. So let's talk about some play examples for forward passes. In our first play at 2nd and 7 and A's 35, at the snap, B75 is flagged for defensive holding against A61 at the A's 36-yard line, so that's a yard beyond the line of scrimmage. A9's pass to A81 is either A, incomplete, or B, caught by A81 at A's 40, who is then tackled at the 50. In our first scenario, we have an incomplete pass, so that play didn't get, first of all, this is not a personal foul, so it's not subject to the tack-on principle that I just discussed. So in the first example, we just go 10 yards to the previous spot. That's enough yardage for a first down, and the ball be at A's 45. In the second example, the gain to the 50 is more than the 10 yards. Therefore, that penalty would be declined so that A would get the better yardage. In our second example, it's 1st and 10 at B's 45. B92 is flagged for a face mask against A12 prior to the pass. That is a personal foul, that face mask measure. A1's pass is caught by A81 at B's 35. He then fumbles at B's 30. The ball rolls to B's 25, where it is recovered by either A, A14, or B, B9. In the first example, since A is in possession and the play gained beyond the line of scrimmage, we can enforce that penalty half the distance to the goal from the dead ball spot, which would make it A's ball 1st and 10 at B's 12.5. In the second example with the change of possession, the only place to enforce that penalty is the previous spot, so we'd go 15 yards from there, and it would still be A's ball, 1st and 10. Second type of play is a free kick play. Free kick play is the interval between the time the ball is kicked and the end of the kick. That is not to be confused with a free kick down. A free kick down just is a down with a free kick on it. There are restrictions on specific types of blocks on free kick downs. Again, the basic spot for enforcement on free kick plays is the previous spot, specifically for B fouls most of the time. Although A fouls can be enforced there, they can also be enforced at the spot where the dead ball belongs to Team B. Almost every foul that B commits, with a specific exception of an illegal wedge formation, can be enforced at the previous spot, or rather has to be enforced at the previous spot. Some examples for free kick plays. Let's say we free kick at the 35 before B9 catches the kick at B's 5. B42 is flagged for blocking below the waist against A15 at B's 40, and B9 returns his kick to A's 40. The only place to enforce that penalty is from the previous spot, so we'd go 15 yards, and we would replay the free kick down from the 50-yard line. The second example, we're free kicking from the 20. A13 is flagged for being offsides on the kicking team offsides. B9 catches the kick at B's 15 and returns it to B's 40, where either he is tackled or, in the second part, he fumbles and the ball is recovered by A52. In A, that is a foul by A, which can be enforced from the spot where the dead ball belongs to Team B. B has the ball, we can tack it on and give B the ball at B's 45. Note it would also be possible here for the B to have that penalty enforced at the previous spot with the down repeated, though it seems unlikely in this case. In the second example, in B, where we had a turnover on the play and B is not in final possession, the only place to enforce the penalty is at the previous spot with a replay of the free kick down. Scrimmage kick plays are the interval between a snap and when a scrimmage kick ends. Again, this is different than a down with a scrimmage kick on it, because scrimmage kick downs include the return, whereas scrimmage kick plays do not. The basic spot, there are a couple of options here. If it's not a PSK foul, it's a previous spot. If it is a PSK foul, it is the post-scrimmage kick spot. We'll talk about post-scrimmage kick spots here in a minute. And again, fouls by A can be enforced at the spot where the dead ball belongs to Team B. That is all possible. There are some specific non-PSK fouls by B, running into or roughing the kicker, leaping the punch shield, leap immediately to mind. But pretty much any foul that B commits right at the line of scrimmage prior to the kick can be a non-PSK foul. As an example, on 4th and 12 at A's 34, right at the snap, B77 is flagged for defensive holding against A66 while attempting a pull and shoot. A14's kick is caught by B5 at B's 20. B5 returns the ball to the 50 before stepping out of bounds. This is not a post-scrimmage kick foul. Therefore, the only place to enforce the penalty is the previous spot, 10 yards, and a replay of the down because it's not enough to gain the first down. In the second example, 4th and 7 at A's 15, Team A is flagged for illegal formation for having 5 players in the backfield. B5 catches the kick at B's 40 and runs to A's 45. B has the option here, and I'm sure they would take the option of tacking this play on, or the 5-yard penalty on to the end of the kick. They could, again, enforce that penalty at the previous spot, but given the return yardage they gained here, that seems not particularly likely. And now we'll talk about running plays. And running plays are basically anything that don't fit into the other 3 categories. And it's also important to note here that each separate run segment has its own basic spot. So a run segment is, I have the ball, I'm running with the ball. If I fumble, everything that occurs until that fumble is caught or recovered or declared dead by rule is part of my run segment, and the basic spot for my run segment depends on where the run ends. If the run ends behind the neutral zone, we use the previous spot as the basic spot. If the run ends beyond the neutral zone, we use the end of that specific related run as the basic spot of enforcement for running plays. Here are some examples. 3rd and 5 at A's 30, A24 takes a handoff and runs around the left end. B73 grabs and pulls his face mask at either A's 28 or A's 35. A24 then fumbles at the spot and the ball rolls to A's 37 where it's recovered by a grounded B62. In the first example, the foul occurred in the backfield and the run ended in the backfield because A's 28 is in the backfield. Therefore, we would enforce that penalty from the previous spot, 15 yards, automatic first down. In the second example, however, A did gain 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage before the fumble occurred. Therefore, that is our basic spot, and we tack the penalty on from there. Additionally, second play, 2nd and 12 at B48. A31 is running with the ball at B40 when he fumbles. During A31's run, B61 holds the defensive holding at against A74. Fumble is recovered by A81 at B35, and he is then tackled at B32. In this case, if they are to accept the penalty, which is more advantageous here, the only place to enforce the penalty is from the end of A31's run at B40. They can't tack this penalty on to the end of A81's run because the foul did not occur during A81's run segment. It's important to note also that generally speaking on pass plays and kick plays, after the kick ends or the pass is caught, now we have a running play. So we could have these types of things occurring on all of these types of plays. Again, coming out of high school football, the 3-and-1 principle looks an awfully lot like the all but one principle, except it kind of applies a little bit more limited basis in NCAA. It only applies if the enforcement spot is not included in the statement of the penalty. Many fouls in the NCAA rules have the specific statement of where we enforce the penalty from, regardless of the situation in which the foul occurs. For example, illegal touching of a forward pass by an originally eligible receiver is a loss of down to the previous spot all the time, no exception. Illegal touching by an ineligible receiver is a 5-yard penalty from the previous spot. It doesn't matter where that foul occurs, field of play, end zone, beyond the line, behind the line. We'll always enforce in that spot. But basically, the 3-and-1 principle frequently applies to run plays beyond the neutral zone or when there is no neutral zone. And it does apply to a limited number of A fouls behind the neutral zone, like illegal batting or illegal kicking, helping the runner, or potentially a live ball and sportsmanlike conduct penalty against A. You can see here the 3-and-1 principle is if we have a foul by the opponent either beyond or behind the basic spot, we would enforce that penalty from the basic spot if the 3-and-1 principle applies. We have a foul by the team in possession beyond the basic spot, we'd enforce that penalty at the basic spot if the 3-and-1 principle applies, but we would enforce a foul by the team in possession behind the basic spot from the spot of the foul, again, if the 3-and-1 principle applies and the enforcement spot is not included in the statement of the penalty. So hopefully that clears some things up as it relates to the 3-and-1 principle. Let's talk about contact fouls by A behind the neutral zone. For the following fouls committed by the offensive team behind the neutral zone, the penalty is always going to be enforced the previous spot. Illegal use of hands, holding, illegal blocks, that could include chop blocks, blocks in the back, clipping, etc., or any personal fouls. We would enforce the penalty for those fouls regardless of where they occur behind the neutral zone, as long as they occur in the field of play at the previous spot. So this, again, we just talked about the 3-and-1 principle a second ago. This is an exception to the 3-and-1 principle. But if any of these fouls occur in A's end zone, the penalty is a safety. So in this case, fouls in A's end zone do kind of meet the criteria for the 3-and-1 principle as it relates to contact fouls by A behind the neutral zone. It's also important to note here that we could tack these fouls on to the spot where B has possession of the ball on scrimmage kick plays. You know, if we have a chop block on a punt play and then B returns the punt, we don't have to enforce that penalty at the previous spot. B could take the 15-yard penalty in that case from the end of the kick. Here are some examples. 3rd and 10 at A's 4. A1's pass is completed to A81, who's tackled at A's 20, but prior to the pass, A71 is flagged for offensive holding, either at A's 2 or in A's end zone. In the first example, where the foul occurred at A's 2, we would enforce that penalty at the previous spot based on the principle we've just talked about. However, in the second example, where the foul occurred in A's end zone, that's going to result in a safety because the foul is in A's end zone. 2nd and 5 at B's 40. A1's pass to A81 is incomplete, but prior to the pass, A62 and A45 are flagged for a chop block at B's 43, 3 yards in the backfield. The only place to enforce this contact foul by A is from the previous spot. So if the penalty is accepted, it'll be 2nd and 20 at A's 45-yard line. Let's talk about post-scrimmage kick fouls. PSK is only applicable if all of the following statements are true. The foul has to occur during a scrimmage kick. The kick cannot be a try, a successful field goal, or in an extra period. It could apply on an unsuccessful field goal, however. The ball has to cross the neutral zone, and Team B will next put the ball into play. If we're missing any of those conditions, we enforce the penalty at the previous spot. If those statements are all true, we use the end of the kick spot, the spot where the kick was caught, recovered, or declared dead by rule, as our basic spot for enforcement, and then we would apply the 3-and-1 principle to that. So important to remember, if the foul occurs before the kick, it's not a post-scrimmage kick foul. If the ball doesn't cross the neutral zone, it's not a post-scrimmage kick foul. And if Team A is in possession at the end of the play, it's not a post-scrimmage kick foul. Here are some examples. 4th and 12 at A's 40, while A1's punt is in the air, B6 holds A43 either at B's 35 or B's 15. The kick is fair caught by B7 at B's 25-yard line. In the first example, since the foul is beyond the PSK spot, we would enforce the penalty from the post-scrimmage kick spot, which is the 25, 10 yards back to the 15. However, in the second example, since the foul occurred behind the post-scrimmage kick spot, we'd go half the distance to goal from the spot of the foul, and it would be B's ball at their own 7.5-yard line. In our second example, 4th and 7 at B's 49, while A1's punt is in the air, B65 blocks A15 in the back at B's 20. The ball is muffed by B17 and recovered by at B's 15 by a ground at either B6 or A14. In the first example, this is a post-scrimmage kick foul. The penalty occurred beyond the end of the kick, so we would go half the distance to goal from the end of the kick. In the second example, however, A's in possession. They would decline the penalty. If they were to accept the penalty, this would not meet a post-scrimmage kick enforcement. We would go back to the previous spot and enforce the penalty 10 yards. In that case, it would be enough for a first down. That is an impractical result for A, since they got a lot more yardage from declining the penalty. Let's transition here into other commonly called fouls. Let's talk about defensive pass interference. If the foul is less than 15 yards from the previous spot, it is A's ball at the spot of the foul. If the foul is 15 or more yards from the previous spot, it's A's ball 15 yards from the previous spot. If the ball is snapped between B's 17 and B's 2, and the penalty occurs beyond B's 2, it's A's ball at B's 2. If the ball is snapped on or inside B's 2 or on or inside B's 3, if it's a try down, the penalty is enforced half the distance to the goal. Some things to keep in mind here is that means that DPI, with that exception of the bottom bullet there, is almost never enforced half the distance to the goal. If there are 15 yards to be had and the foul is more than 15 yards downfield, we will take it. Some other things of note, when we talk about spot of the foul versus previous spot, we're also talking about lateral ball position. Whether that's left hash, right hash. One thing that is helpful, and we'll talk about when we get to the mechanics of enforcement later, is generally the press box hash is position 1, the press box upright is position 2, middle of the field is position 3, the opposite upright is position 4, and the opposite hash is position 5. So if we were snapping the ball at position 1, and we throw a ball all the way to the other side zone and it's incomplete, we have pass interference. If we're going to the spot of the foul because it's less than 15 yards, we'd go and put the ball in position 5. If we're going 15 yards from the previous spot because it's more than 15 yards, and that would include moving the ball to B's 2-yard line based on the principles of the third bullet, we'd put the ball back at position 1 because we'd be enforcing the penalty from the previous spot. So here's an example play. B17 interferes with A16 in B's end zone, but the ball is snapped from either B's 30, B's 10, or B's 2. It's going to be first down for A in all cases. In the first play, it's a 15-yard penalty. It's the ball to go to B's 15. In the second example, the ball is snapped between the 17 and the 2. We're going to go to the 2-yard line. In the third example, we're going half the distance to goal. Let's talk about kick-catch interference. Most kick-catch interference fouls are 15 yards from the spot of the foul. Important to remember that A is not permitted to enter into the area 1 yard in front of the returner between the returner's shoulders before the returner touches the ball. Also of note, on an onside kick, the receiver has the same kick-catch protection if the ball is kicked immediately into the ground and bounces only once before he touches it, as he would if the ball is kicked directly into the air. If we have kick-catch interference on a free kick play against a player who's signaled for a fair catch behind B's 25, very unlikely. We need a very speedy player and a very high kick. In that case, we give them 15 yards from B's 25-yard line, so they'd get the ball at B's 40. If we have kick-catch interference behind the goal line, also unlikely, we would award a touchback and then add 15 yards. On a free kick, that means we'd go to the 25 and add 15. On a punt, we'd go to the 10 or to the 20 and add 15 yards. Fouls during or after a touchdown, field goal, or try. Not going to get too deep into these, but I do think some of these things are important of note. If we have a foul by the non-scoring team on a touchdown and it's a personal foul or an unsportsmanlike conduct foul, it can be enforced on the try or the kickoff. 5 and 10-yard penalties are declined by rule unless illegal touching makes enforcement possible. If you've been doing some of the quizzes I put on the website, I've talked about some of those plays, but I'll circle back to that probably in an advanced penalty enforcement session. Again, I talked about this on the previous couple of slides. DPI on tries from on or inside B's 3, we consider that to be a half the distance enforcement. If the foul occurs after the touchdown but before they're ready for play on the try, or it's a live ball penalty enforced as a dead ball penalty on a touchdown play, it could be enforced on the try or kickoff. If it's a successful field goal, we can either cancel the score and enforce the penalty at the previous spot, or accept the score with personal fouls and unsportsmanlike conduct penalties enforced from the succeeding spot. Again, live enforced as dead, or dead ball fouls that follow field goals would also be enforced at the succeeding spot. One thing that is important to note here, prop was supposed to meet, I think, this week. That meeting's been delayed due to all of the other things that are going on right now, health-wise. But there is a proposal to extend an option to enforce penalties that would be enforced on the try or the kickoff with this kind of enforcement to be enforced on the succeeding spot in extra periods. Obviously, if we get the rules changes through, we'll probably have a call or a presentation about that. Note here that penalties that would place either team's free kick line behind their own 5-yard line are enforced to the next succeeding spot. Here's an example. Let's say we had either between the touchdown or a try, or on the try, before the kickoff or whatever, we had 4 separate actions that would be penalized as 4 separate unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Not very likely, but possible. In that case, since we can't move the free kick line behind the 5, we'd go from, and they're all against the 18A, we go from the 35 to the 20 on the first one. We go from the 20 to the 10 on the second for half the distance. We go from the 10 to the 5 on the third. And now we have this 4th foul we can't enforce based on this principle. That means that penalty would go, for those of you who've worked indoor, we have fouls that go in the bank. And that penalty would be enforced on the first play that follows this free kick down. So if we had a free kick, the kick return, we would then tack 15 more yards onto the kick return. Again, not particularly likely. Just know we can't move either team's free kick line behind their own 5-yard line. Here is a list of all of the loss of down fouls by A. I have included their yardage and their enforcement spot in all these cases. Some of these do include the all but one principle as part of the statement of the penalty, but anywhere you see PS as previous spot. I will say here that there is not a loss of down for illegally batting the ball if it's a backward pass in flight that's been batted or if it's a ball in player possession. All of our automatic first down fouls by B are here on this list: pass interference, personal fouls, and unsportsmanlike conduct. On the illegal contact with eligible receiver, I would include defensive holding against an eligible receiver during a down in which a legal forward pass crosses the neutral zone. That also includes an automatic first down, even though it's only a 10-yard penalty. So let's transition here into mechanics for penalty enforcement. The calling official, give the prelim after the ball is dead unless there are multiple flags down. If you have the only flag, you can throw the flag and give the signal. This helps the referee and gets the rest of the crew moving with enforcement. But it's also important to make sure your flag is in the correct spot, especially if it's a live ball foul. If we have multiple flags down for the same action, for the same foul, make sure all of the flags are moved to the same spot. If enforcement is obvious, just provide the offending player's number. The referee will know what to do. But don't always assume that the referee knows what's going on. The referee's got their own responsibilities, so don't hesitate in providing as much information as you feel is necessary. For the referee, again, if enforcement is obvious, no prelim, proceed immediately to the announcement. If we do need an option from a team, give a prelim, get the option, and give your final announcement. There's usually not a need to confer with the center judge on penalty enforcement in most cases, especially when that option is obvious. But it does help if it needs to slow down, especially if it's a referee flag. The center judge, or the umpire in a crew of 7, is primarily responsible for marking off penalties and must have thorough knowledge of penalty enforcement so that he can enforce penalties with minimal referee involvement. For line of scrimmage officials, whoever is with the chains, so line judge in the first half, headline judge in the second half. They're going to walk off with the center judge or in a crew of 7 with the umpire. The official opposite the chains will hold the enforcement spot until the center judge and the other wing have completed enforcement. Then they'll walk off the penalty with the umpire. It's important to note whether your crew mechanically likes to use the O2Os to communicate this. Some referees don't want you on the O2O when they're on the mic because it can confuse them. My crew generally uses, we communicate with making eye contact with 1 finger up for 5-yard penalties, 2 finger up for 10-yard penalties, 3 up for 15s, where I might chop my arm for half the distance to goal to get confirmation before we start walking. In a crew of 8 only, the umpire walks off the penalty with the press box wing to ensure proper enforcement. The deep officials are also responsible to make sure we have correct enforcement, check on the status of the clock. You may check lateral ball position if that's important, or we should be in position 1 or position 3 or whatever. So just make sure we have that stuff ready to go so when the referee's done with his announcement, they can get confirmation from one of the officials whether the clock should be running or stopped or whatever is going on. I hope you found this presentation valuable. I apologize for the recording of the call not coming through, but I'm hopeful that this makes up for it a little bit, and I look forward to talking to everyone again.